Hello and welcome to the CIPS Queensland Regional Webinar Series. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Dougal Lodge on the CIPS Queensland Committee, and we're very happy to be inviting you along to share a couple of case studies and a panel discussion on procurement in regional Queensland. This is hopefully going to be the first of a number of series which we do, so we'll look forward to a lot of regional engagement. We do have a couple of housekeeping issues just to take you through first. So first of all, this webinar will be recorded and it's going to be available through the CIPS YouTube channel. So please look forward to finding that later on. We'd like you to use the Q&A tool to be able to put any questions in there, and also if you have any suggestions for the webinars and any interesting items going forward. We want to be getting some feedback from you. So we do have a couple of surveys which we'll take you through in a moment. But first of all, one of the objectives of what we wanted to be doing through this process is to be engaging with regional Queensland procurement people. The CIPS committee recognises that it's a bit difficult to be in regional locations all the time, face to face, but certainly we think we can start to use the webinar format for a bit more engagement activity, and we'd love to see how we can do this and get your feedback around it. So today is really the first of hopefully a number of engagements over the next little while. We have some fantastic case studies coming up today, which we'd love to take you through. The first around Indigenous procurement in Townsville. Rob Passmore is going to share his learnings and actions there, and we're also going to share a case study from Victoria around the GROW program from Gippsland, which is around how private sector and public sector came together to drive local economic development, local suppliers and Indigenous supplier development as well. So we should have a survey, which would be great to share through to you in a moment, if we can pull that one up. We'd love it if you could give us some feedback here on a couple of key questions around, first of all, what's a good format that you'd like to see us engaging in, the CIPS Queensland group engaging with local procurement people in the regional areas. And the second question is around what topics of interest you'd like to be seeing from us and engaging in as well. So I'll just give you a moment to answer those questions. We're going to be muting all the participants through the webinar itself, but we will be having a number of our panel members able to share their feedback and have some discussion. We'd love to see any feedback coming through to the Queensland at CIPS email address as well, which we'll have on this web presentation at the end as well. That's great. So we've got some good feedback there on a couple of the different areas where people would like to focus, lunchbox webinars and around procurement capability support as well. Okay, fantastic. So one of the things we did hear a bit about from various sources over the last little while, where we've been thinking about this, is just how to access really good procurement information and training capability information, as we saw there in the survey. One area, if you haven't been on recently, is the CIPS website. There's some really fantastic information on here for non-members and members. And so, yeah, I suggest you really do have a look at that. It's got category information, lots of best practices and tools and templates. And the team in Queensland Government, Sharon and Lauren and the team there, have done a really fantastic job also in developing some information on their website as well, which is available. So suggest also to have a bit of a look there if you have time and you're looking for various bits and pieces. Obviously, training's available through CIPS, and there are also various training activities available through various entities through the Queensland Government, local buy, and other organisations as well. So certainly those are available on webinar, but also face-to-face also. We'll now hand over to our first case study today from Townsville City Council. We're really lucky to have Rob Passmore, the Chief Procurement Officer of Townsville, joining us. Thanks for coming along, Rob. Rob's been with doing procurement for around 15 years now across a really wide range of industries, including local government, mining and health. Has a really strong passion for Indigenous and social procurement. So thanks for joining us, Rob, and we'll look forward to hearing your case study.
Thank you very much, Dougal. So if we move forward to the first slide, Look, I've now been at Townsville City Council for 18 months, and look, historically, this is an area that Council has strongly supported, both social procurement and Indigenous procurement as well. One of my first observations when joining Council was we had a lot of great people doing some great things in this space, but there was no real framework sort of pulling this all together and providing a bit of structure, sort of where we're trying to get to. We're quite fortunate in Townsville that there are a lot of Indigenous businesses. They have a lot of capability. They've grown to good size, and they're sustainable businesses as well. So for myself, coming into Council, I seen there was a lot of great intent. I really just wanted to bring it all together, put some targets in place, and sort of really I suppose drive those social procurement aims and those Indigenous sort of business targets together in a structured fashion. So look, 6 years ago, Townsville City Council allocated 10% of their evaluation criteria to social procurement, and more specifically, Indigenous owned businesses. So if you're a Townsville-based business and you're an Indigenous business, then automatically you'd be allocated the 10%. So again, a great start. However, there were more broad, other social sort of procurement considerations that Council was not considering as part of that. So we look at things like sort of sponsorship of local organisations, traineeships, apprenticeships. So in terms of that social procurement, there was no recognition. So one of the first things I did when joining Council was really broadening that social procurement to recognise the community contribution that local businesses provide, but as well as recognising that the Indigenous owned businesses obviously provide some, again, additional benefit to the community, and Council's got that responsibility in terms of reconciliation. So really recognising that 10% can be allocated not just for being an Indigenous owned business, but then for other also for engaging other socially responsible organisations as well. And I'll get to that in a bit more detail shortly. So I mentioned previously, it was really about providing structure and a framework around social procurement. So I was quite fortunate to have a supportive leadership base at Townsville City Council, which enabled me to pull this together sort of quite quickly and then roll that out. So ranging from the mid sort of down to the general manager level, there was nothing but support. So I was very grateful for that environment. And look, we're close to sort of getting where we want to in terms of the implementation of the framework, but there's still sort of some way to go, but we're definitely getting closer. Next slide, please. So look, some of the bigger things that we've really sort of focused on as part of this framework was the establishment of 3% of addressable expenditure being allocated towards Indigenous businesses. Now this wasn't an immediate 3%, but it was a sort of sliding target, a building target. So and this was over a 5-year period. So we started at 0.6%, sort of then to 1.2, and then to 1.8 in the coming financial year. So we didn't want to just have the immediate 3% target, just because we want to ensure that we work with Indigenous businesses, but then allow them to really build that capacity as well. And we wanted to ensure that obviously any target that we had in place was reasonable for council officers as well. The next big thing was the establishment of a local Indigenous suppliers panel. So if there were big opportunities, we felt that there was local Indigenous businesses that could provide, again, that sort of, the skills and capability to deliver on certain projects, we could then employ directly or engage directly through the panel as opposed to having to go to tender. So we've found there's been a lot of streamlining sort of through that. And then look, I found that the biggest thing is just a council-wide education, just regarding the importance of Indigenous procurement and sort of what that means for Indigenous businesses and a lot of the barriers that have been faced historically for a lot of those Indigenous businesses. But then also the wider social procurement as well. So we're talking about, again, sponsorship of local sporting organisations and organisations providing traineeships and apprenticeships, as well as supporting white ribbon accreditation. So I'm just going to run through quickly the social procurement scoring guide that's been established. So you can see here, to obtain a score of 10, if we have suppliers either being a Indigenous business or meeting any of the other criteria, then they'd be allocated the 10%. So for us, we wanted to ensure that we still respect that again, the importance of council's role in reconciliation and providing economic opportunities for Indigenous businesses, but then also recognising, again, a lot of the other sort of social community contributions that non-Indigenous businesses sort of provide. So we look at, we recognise white ribbon accreditation, and then if we have businesses that provide 5% or greater of their contract value to as a financial contribution to the community in terms of sort of sponsorships, potentially could be sort of volunteer work as well. We really want to capture that. And then you can then see for score 9, again, it's any 2 criteria sort of as well. So again, being again, a sort of greater than 5% of contract value, white ribbon accreditation, but then also recognising businesses that have significant Indigenous employment or potentially a joint venture, with an Indigenous business as well. So really wanted to recognise that. And then you can see as we sort of go further down the scoring scale, we still, again, recognise that there'll be businesses that, might not meet sort of all these previous criteria, but we want to provide some recognition. So if you're registered with Supply Nation, we're happy to provide a 7. Again, if you're still providing some financial contribution to communities, so 2 to 5%, we're happy to provide a 7 out of a 10 as well. And you can then see on the following page, that again, as the scores get lower and lower, the requirements obviously for reaching those scores get less and less. So, what we've sort of found is that for organisations to really get those higher scores for social procurement, we do have high expectations in council. But again, alternatively, we are rewarding those organisations. The more they do for the community, the higher that their score will be in terms of social procurement. Now, look, we've then put in some additional measures as well to really take advantage, of the current environment of council, and to really sort the social procurement outcomes that council are trying to drive. So the biggest one is, firstly, we've had to adjust our tender response and RFQ response templates to actually capture a lot of this social procurement related data. Now, this took a lot of work. Obviously, a lot of the language had to be tailored, not to allow just for your bigger corporate organisations, your more sophisticated businesses to understand the information requirements, but also, a lot of our mum and pop businesses as well. At council, approximately 50% of our suppliers are small businesses, so we want to ensure that the language and the response templates were tailored to allow for all types of users to provide the required information. We've then updated our procurement procedures, policies, and various guidance docs to talk about the requirements around engaging Indigenous businesses. So what we've recently implemented is that where there's existing capability in the local Indigenous supply market for again for a procurement activity, there is an expectation that you would seek at least one quote from a local Indigenous supplier. So at Townsville City Council, if we're obtaining having to deliver a project that's sort of greater than $15,000 but less than 200, we'll require 3 quotes. So again, if there's capability, we require at least one quote coming from an Indigenous supplier. And then one of the bigger things was then whole of council training, just around, again, these revised social procurement requirements, and really talking about the intent of what we're trying to provide, but then the benefit for the wider community. Yep. And then additionally, at Townsville City Council, all purchase orders before they're released, they're reviewed by the purchasing officers and the procurement teams. So if we've then seen that, again, council officers haven't obtained the required quotes from Indigenous businesses where there's capability, we'll then just go back to those council officers and provide that education about the requirements of our social procurement policy and the need to obtain quotes from an Indigenous supplier, again, where that capability exists. And then to ensure that this regime was successful, we've done a lot of work to talk to various stakeholders across the business and to actually understand where's the internal advocacy sort of network for what we're trying to build here. Because again, like most organisations, that there can be resistance to change in certain areas. So sort of working with key advocates across the business to really promote what we're trying to do and to support sort of Indigenous procurement. And then we find sort of essentially that divide and conquer approach has worked really well. And then obviously there's monthly reporting to management in regards to our Indigenous expenditure as well. Yeah, and look, this is for me probably one of the bigger things here. Again, social procurement. It's really about helping organisations that historically, or I should say, business owners historically who haven't had the opportunities that a lot of, I guess, more mature businesses, more mature business owners would have had in terms of again, economic opportunities, procurement opportunities. So look, our heart's really in the right place here, and it's the approach that we're taking here. It's really about support, it's encouragement, and it's really a reward-based approach. If we do find council officers who are compliant, again, we will provide that education, but really it's not about punishment. It's really about encouraging officers to do the right thing, because again, that's what social procurement is about. It's really about helping organisations and really providing opportunities to organisations and people who might not have historically had a lot of these opportunities, and it's really about doing the right things. So by having an approach that's more around that, again, sort of more the stick and not the carrot, really go against the spirit of what we're trying to achieve. So we always ensure that we're mindful that it's really come from a positive space, and it's really about support and encouragement. So look, outcomes to date. Again, it's been extremely successful at council. Again, look, we're well ahead of target in terms of our percentage of business expenditure. And we've seen that a number of the Indigenous businesses within Townsville really are developing that capacity, which then opens up further opportunities within council. So look, it's again, the feedback and support has been fantastic, and we're really seeing look, any potential perceptions around Indigenous or engaging Indigenous businesses has been well and truly sort of broken. So again, the organisations we work with, we recognise some will have stronger sort of capability capacity than others, but we ensure that we work with different businesses that are along, I suppose, the different evolutions in terms of their, I suppose, their overall business development journey, and we make sure we cater opportunities for that. But it's been a fantastic initiative, and it's where we're seeing great outcomes for the community. But look, in terms of what's next for us, it's really around just strengthening, again, our reporting and performance monitoring mechanisms for social procurement. So we're seeing, again, a lot of good stuff now in terms of the Indigenous, the Indigenous procurement. It's really about sort of strengthening now I suppose, the other side in terms of the broader social procurement categories. That's it from me. Thank you.
All right, well, thanks for sharing the update there, Rob. And I think we thought it would be a really great case study to share, just looking at really practical application in putting together some of these best practices around Indigenous procurement. So thanks for sharing that, Rob. And if any of you would like to put any questions or ideas, suggestions into the Q&A box, look forward to your suggestions. We're now going to shift gears a little bit, and we're going to talk about bringing together private and public sector organisations in a regional context to drive economic development. We're really lucky to have Cameron Spence with us. Cameron's the Program Manager for GROW Gippsland. He's had a lot of significant experience doing major projects and procurement across a range of industries in Victoria. He's had about 9 years working for the MAV, which is the Municipal Association of Victoria, which is the equivalent of local buy here in Queensland. And through that covered a lot of different industry sectors. So Cam, thanks very much for joining us today, and we'll look forward to you taking us through the journey you guys went on in Gippsland. Thank you.
Great, thanks Dougal, and afternoon everyone. It's great to be joining you all. I'd like to be joining you in person in Queensland, I should say, because it's quite cool here in Melbourne today. But great to be telling the story of the GROW Gippsland program to you. Also great to hear Rob's presentation on the work that Townsville City Council is doing, as Dougal said, having previously worked at the MAV, which is the peak body for Victorian local government. I have to say that the local government sector was a little bit of a laggard, I would call them, from a social procurement perspective. So particularly compared to the Victorian government, which has been pretty innovative from a social procurement context. So great to see what's happening there in Townsville and some leadership from local government. Dougal, if you want to go to the next slide. So I'm going to talk to you about the GROW Gippsland program today. There's quite a lot to the program, so I'm going to try and keep it relatively simple because I could talk about it for quite an extended period of time, but that's not the intent of the session this afternoon. So just to get straight into it, so GROW Gippsland, so what GROW is, so GROW actually stands for Growing Regional Opportunities for Work. So it's a regional place-based program, exists across 5 different regions in Victoria. So if people are familiar with Victoria, which I think most people would be, so Gippsland's in the east or southeast of the state. The program's also run in the Geelong region, Ballarat, Bendigo and Shepparton. And it's what we call a collective impact program. So it's where any organisation effectively commits to a set of principles to try and build a stronger regional economy and to try and increase social outcomes and social inclusion in the region. So a bit of context about the Gippsland program, which is the second of the GROW programs to come into play. So it actually started in the Geelong region. And a bit of context about Gippsland and I guess why the program is so important to the region. And again, some people will be familiar with the region. So Gippsland, and particularly the Latrobe Valley, which is a major part of Gippsland, is in significant economic transition. So legacy industries, particularly coal-fired energy generation, are starting to decline, as is the case in Queensland as well. So really, I guess, high-profile case and really where GROW came about was in 2017, one of the major energy plants, which was the Hazelwood energy plant, closed, major employer in the region, with six months notice from date of announcement to date of closure. So, significant impact to the region, significant impact on local businesses, significant impact on local employment. So you've kind of got a macro issue and some micro issues as well. So if you look at the region more broadly, It's also a region which has significant pockets of socio-economic disadvantage. So the Latrobe Valley itself is an area which is rated the most highly for disadvantage in Victoria. So if you look at if anyone's familiar with the CIPS index, which is the index of socio-economic disadvantage, there's a number of pockets of disadvantage across Gippsland. And so really looking at those two things, so the program was set up by the Latrobe Valley Authority, so that's a government agency which was established after the closure of Hazelwood. So they were given a fairly significant investment of state government funds to try and support the transition of the region and to try and, I guess, help to build a stronger regional economy and look to what the future looks like for that region, because other power plants, other coal mines, the timber industry are going to continue to decline over the coming years. We've recently had the announcement of the impending closure of one of the other power stations in Yallourn in 2027. So this issue is not going to go away. So the LVA really looked at what was happening across the state. They saw the GROW program in Geelong and they looked to put it in place in the Gippsland region, and did so in 2018. So how it works, as I said, it's a collective impact program. Organisations commit to the program, so it's not something which is a compulsory obligation on things. It's a bit, to be honest, it's a bit of a social kind of issue. So there's a what we call a compact, which is a set of high-level principles that organisations commit to embedding in their business principles, and they're really outlined in that slide there. So it really looks at the way businesses procure, and it looks at the way businesses employ. So really looking to drive more money into the local economy. So looking at procurement, looking at local procurement, obviously, is a key driver. What's spent outside the region, what can be shifted into the region to try and support the regional economy and local businesses. Looking at social procurement to really to try and tackle that disadvantage that I talked about, and picking up on Rob's discussion. So looking at how we can drive better outcomes for particular target groups in the community, and in Gippsland, that's transitioning workers, it's long-term unemployed, Aboriginal people with disabilities. There's also quite a significant cold community. And also looking, and I won't talk to it today because it's not really a CIPS related subject, but also looking to the way the businesses employ. So looking at being more inclusive. There's about 100 organisations who have made the commitment to GROW at this point in time, and that's really a broad mix. So that's state and local government. So there's 6 local council areas in Gippsland. They're all part of the program. A lot of state government departments and agencies, health services, education providers. A lot of SMEs are part of the program who have made the commitment. And then really, and what I'm going to talk to a bit more today, because the major projects is a big focus, and what we're really excited about, and it's probably of interest, I think, to people here today, is that a lot of prime contractors or tier 1 contractors who aren't actually from the region have committed to be part of the program. And that for us is a really positive thing, because it means that they've shown a commitment to trying to use the work that they're delivering to deliver a stronger regional outcome. And that hasn't always been the case. This is a very busy slide, and I'm not going to talk to all the opportunities, but really the bottom line is the fundamentals of what GROW is about. So the organisations who are part of the program, they commit to putting in place actions and developing an annual action plan and reporting on outcomes around those key attributes. So obviously buying local creates local prosperity and jobs. Buying social supports disadvantaged communities. Obviously it also helps to build a stronger regional economy. Offering employment pathways, particularly in the project perspective, helps to build a pipeline of skills to be able to support the investment that's happening in the region, which can be a real challenge. Often the jobs come very last minute, and the region's not equipped to be able to actually provide the skills that are needed regionally to support the project. So having that pathway of projects is really important. And then employing target groups, as I said, so it's about inclusion. It's about making sure that everyone gets an opportunity. We also have a strong focus on local employment. Obviously that comes through the local procurement side of things, but a particular targeted focus on what we would say is inclusive employment. Thanks, Dougal. So, and this is where it can get really complicated. I'm not going to get bogged down on this too much, but I mean, this is really in terms of how we deliver that. So we've got a number of focus areas. The GROW team itself is 6 people. So 6 people with various areas of expertise covering social benefit suppliers and kind of Aboriginal engagement, inclusive employment, and then procurement expertise. So as I said, the organisations who are part of the program, they make a commitment to those principles. They make a commitment to undertake their own actions. And then the GROW team, my team, is there to support them with the delivery of those individual actions that they've identified. And these are really the areas that we focus on. So we focus on building procurement capability. So how can we ensure that our regional procurers are ensuring that the process is going to maximise the opportunities for local businesses for social outcomes. We look at local supplier readiness. So really those two, and this will be very common in the areas that you're working in as well, can be a significant challenge. I mean, one of the things we heard when we first started the program was that there's a significant gap between suppliers and procurers. The procurers often told us that the local suppliers don't have the skills and capability to be able to respond to our processes. That wasn't a criticism of them as businesses, that was a criticism of their readiness to be able to respond and the quality of their procurement submissions. And then what we heard from local suppliers was, well, we never get to look at these opportunities. And so we're trying to, I guess, bridge that divide that does exist. We've got a big focus on major projects, which I'm going to talk to. We've got a big focus on working and building the capacity and capability of the social benefits supplier market, so that's social enterprise and Aboriginal business. Working in the employment space, as I mentioned. We provide a whole range of toolkit and guidance materials. So from a procurement perspective, that's things like local and social procurement template, evaluation, contract clauses, guidance for suppliers. We've got market engagement tools, which I'll talk to. So we've implemented a regional procurement platform, which is about having a common approach across multiple buyers in the region, which has been a real success. And then it's all underpinned, obviously, by data and reporting. So what's the impact? Some of the things that we look at, one is probably our key driver is what are the employment outcomes that are delivered through the program. But we also look at things like spend shift from outside the region to inside the region. So individual organisations provide us with procurement data that we can use for that purpose. Thanks, Dougal. So major projects, as I said, is a significant focus for us, and this will be common to many people. The reason is pretty clear. The investment in the region presents a significant opportunity, particularly when you're looking to support an economy which is transitioning. So there's a lot of major projects in Gippsland. There's a lot of investment from all levels of government and private industry. And our message is a simple one. For every $100 million spent locally with local suppliers, it has $180 million economic impact and it supports 400 jobs. So really, how can we harness that investment to build a thriving and prospering economy? And that's really what we're working really closely on at the moment. If you want to go through to the next slide, Dougal, I can talk in a little more detail to that. So I've put up the top, I guess, my description, and it'd be interesting to get people's take on this, of what I believe is a real challenge in regional, not just regional, in metropolitan areas as well. And really where I see GROW is kind of filling a bit of a void certainly in regions in Victoria. What we see is there's a lot of advocacy from various groups, chambers of commerce, local governments, etc., for investment in regional areas to support economic growth and jobs. So everyone's saying to the state government, for example, we need more money spent on infrastructure projects because that's how we can stimulate the economy and we can drive local employment and build that prosperity. And consequently, what we are getting, certainly in Victoria, because there's huge investment, and in Gippsland as well, is billions of dollars invested from all levels of government and the private sector in infrastructure projects, in capital works projects. And to me, what's missing, or the big question is, who actually takes responsibility for ensuring that advocacy, or the advocacy that was out there and the investment, actually delivers on what the advocacy was looking to achieve? And if you think about it, there's really no one that exists with that purpose. There was the advocacy, the investment happened, and then the onus tends to get pushed onto the contractors to deliver the outcome that was envisaged through the advocacy. And that can be a real issue, particularly when you're bringing in suppliers who are typically, your tier one prime contractors on the bigger projects, who aren't regional suppliers. They're coming in for a short period of time to deliver a project without a lot of regional context. And that's the role that we're really playing through the GROW program from a project's perspective. So we are acting as the conduit, the arms and legs on the ground, to support really all three proponents involved in the major projects with the delivery. So we're working with the buyers, and that's probably, to be honest, the most simple thing that we do. So that's really around ensuring that the procurement process, when it does go out to market, that it does have the levers in place to maximise the local and social outcomes that are desired for the region. So that's about understanding, well, what's the potential impact of each individual projects. What are the priority outcomes that we should be building into the process? How do we ensure that the process and the contract actually do deliver those outcomes? I think the really critical ones are the next two. So we provide a lot of support, and we're getting approached pretty much on a daily basis now, which is when you're starting to have an impact by prime contractors. So they're coming to us and they're saying to us, we've got the contract now, GROW Gippsland's included in the tender process, for example, as someone to support them. Can you help us to identify the local skills, the local capability, local programs, local employment partners? Can you help us to foster the relationships to be able to deliver on the outcomes that the tender is looking for? And that's outstanding for us. If they're not contacting us, they're not going to deliver the maximum impact, has been our experience. And then really what underpins that is we then provide a lot of support for the local SMEs because, as I said before, and this will be common again, they're great suppliers, they're extremely capable at their day-to-day business, but when it comes to procurement, it's a pretty daunting thing, particularly from a major project perspective, when it can be a really onerous process. So we've actually got 2 funded roles in Gippsland, which we call local procurement advisors, and they're there with the sole purpose of supporting local SMEs around their visibility, capacity and capability to bid for and get involved in these projects. And that's a day-to-day activity that we have. And as I mentioned before, we've wrapped around that a procurement system. So the procurement system is not just for major projects and infrastructure contracts. It's used for operational expenditure as well. But really the premise here was the more buyers in the region we can get using the same platform, the more opportunities and continuity we'll get for local suppliers. And one of the things we really wanted to pilot was to get some of the suppliers, those tier 1s coming into the region, to use the platform, because the platform focuses really particularly around local suppliers. So we're using, in this case, a lot of people will be familiar with the vendor panel platform. So that's our Gippsland regional procurement platform. So that's being used by a number of the major project proponents now. Thanks, Dougal. So just to wrap up, I'll just give you a quick case study, I guess, and there's a great video which can demonstrate this, but I guess how it all comes together. So one of the big projects which was done early on in the program was a new bridge for the rail line down in Gippsland. So a $100 million project. It's just been completed late last year. So we got involved right from the outset through the GROW program. So we worked with Rail Projects Victoria, which is the government agency who was delivering the contract. We helped them with the development of the tender documents, as I outlined. One of the key things that we did, which was a really simple thing, but it was really fundamentally important to delivering local outcomes, was we delivered an Aboriginal business networking session during the tender. So all of the bidders, which was 3 consortiums at the time, came together with us down in Gippsland, and we put a whole lot of local Aboriginal businesses in front of those organisations bidding. So that helped to build some relationships. Obviously, the tender went through. CPB was awarded the contract, which a lot of people will be familiar with. Obviously, one of the biggest contractors in Australia. They joined the program because they saw that we could help them. And then we worked with them through a whole range of different things. So we facilitated local industry briefings with them. We delivered cultural awareness training with the local traditional owner group in the region. We helped them with their local supply chain mapping. We put out their procurement packages through our regional procurement platform. And we supported the local suppliers to understand and respond to CPB's requirements, which I must say were not simple. And there's a great case study and there's a video which I'm happy to circulate afterwards. So one of the businesses that came to the initial Aboriginal business networking event, which was done in December 2018, ended up propagating and supplying 40,000 plants to that project. And it's an Aboriginal business in Orbost, which is in East Gippsland, which was significantly impacted by bushfires, as many people would know. And really, that wouldn't have happened without that event that was run. You know, the connection would never have been made, the relationships wouldn't have existed, and the support that we were able to provide to Mudgee to get them over the line of the procurement hurdles were really paramount in building what was a great outcome for the local region. And I'll leave it there, Dougal.
Right. Thank you very much, Cam, and really appreciate you sharing the GROW story. I think hopefully you guys can see that there's some really interesting learnings, both at a macro and a micro level, being brought through the Gippsland case study as well. So what I would like to do now is bring the panel together to have a bit of sharing some insights and some suggestions. We're really lucky to have some fantastic people here. We've got Justin Butcher joining us from Incitec Pivot, who's on the Queensland committee as well. We've got Richie Woods from James Cook Uni in Townsville, Kylie Thorley from Energy Queensland up in Townsville, David Mailman, based in Brisbane, but done a lot of work in the Mackay region and Indigenous engagements, as well as obviously Rob and Cam. So what I might do is hand it over to Justin, first of all, just to sort of reflect and share any of your insights and then any questions, I suppose, back to the panelists. And what we'll do here is, guys, have a bit of a discussion about the case studies, and we'll bring it back around to the Queensland, giving some feedback to us as well after this.
Thanks, Dougal. And thank you to Rob and Cameron as well. An event like today wouldn't be possible without such good case studies and examples. And I'm very happy to be part of this process. So, reflections and insights for me, I think those two were so dense with great information and leadership really in this area. And you can see that there's, I think, a gap, there's a void which both of these entities have stepped into and taken that leadership role. So I think for me, a lot of learnings I can take back into my workforce, into my day, and how we can do things better. And I know that other people listening will also feel the same way. So, for me, a lot of good blueprints. I like the theme around helping businesses and helping people. And I think that in procurement, not always do we stop and take stock of our role and what we can play in terms of not just buying things, but helping and helping create a difference in the economies we work in, creating jobs, creating employment. These are real issues, they're tangible things that affect people's lives. And I think that we're all in a lucky position in procurement. We're not in this alone, we're in it together. And I think that forums like this, good vehicles for us to share and learn. Because when we're often working our own business or our own silos, not always do we get best practice or just understand what other people are up to. So, for me, there's a lot to unpack in that discussion. I just don't know where necessarily to start. I really like the stuff that Rob was talking about, and coming at it from a heart-based perspective, providing opportunities for people, being positive, supporting and encouraging, they're all important concepts in business, but also in life. And I think that's really powerful stuff. And I think that the gap that the GROW space has sort of stepped into there is really that conduit space where, I've been faced with it in previous roles and in current roles where you'll go into a regional area to support a tender process or so forth. You won't really have good visibility over who's in that local area, what their capacity is, what their capability is. And, as a procurement function, you're not necessarily set up with the internal support and resources to do a big deep dive, full procurement mapping process, so on and so forth, to understand that within the tender window. So for you guys to have done a lot of that front end loading and then be able to connect the dots, that's immense. I would like to understand, question for the team would be how we could, what's the opportunity to roll it out and do it more broadly. I could keep talking, but there's so much to unpack and so much good stuff that just glad to be a part of it and really keen to see what we can do next with it. So. Thanks.
Great. Cool. Richie, I know you've been around in Townsville for a while in the procurement area, lots of experience. Any reflections from your sort of perspective on the case studies and any questions?
I suppose I've got a bit of an advantage because I met with Rob a couple of months ago and got an insight into what he's been doing, and we've started our process of establishing an Indigenous panel and social enterprise panel. Apart from that, I suppose we have a couple of NAIF loans that are not a couple of, one's 98 million, the other one's 70 million to build a couple of new buildings. And part of that is that we have to report on Indigenous engagement, and we've got targets in those contracts to meet. We've had to get the contractors to report every month, and it's been a bit of a challenge, but I think by now getting on the front foot, next time we do something like this, we'll be better prepared.
Yep. Okay, great. And Kylie, I know similarly, Energy Queensland's obviously got a lot of money being invested in northern Queensland and across the state. Any reflections or suggestions, inputs for you?
Yeah. Look, I found Rob's presentation, I guess, really relevant for what we're doing. I really like how they've actually sort of taken that step to develop that formalised framework. I guess for us, we've sort of taken steps to update our tender documents, incorporated in our assessments, but actually pulling into that framework was a takeaway for me. I guess our biggest challenge, and I'm interested in how others handle it, is really that data and reporting. We just don't really have a good hold of our spend, and for us, we're right across the state, so we're probably engaging with a lot of suppliers who fall into this category, and we're just not capturing that we are. So one of the things that we're trying to work on is, I guess, making that information available for our purchasers so that they can see that they are engaging with those types of businesses. But I'm also interested, I know we capture a lot of information from our tenders, how others, I guess, capture that, particularly where businesses, talk about a level of apprenticeships and that sort of thing that they're committing to in that work. So how do we capture it? How do we sort of go and check that they, delivered on everything they committed to? So I guess that's probably an area for me that I'm interested in how others manage. And I guess the other thing, I'm probably interested in how Rob sort of took on that education of the business, how you approach that, and I guess the type of information you covered and just how you got, I guess, the business engaged. We probably have the challenge of, being right across the state and a lot harder to find those key people, but I guess that's probably of interest to me as well. Yep.
I think that the supplier feedback process you described too, Rob, was great. Making sure that there was enough time. That was probably one thing that came through really clearly for me anyway, was got to put time behind these things and resources. So I think both of you sort of talked about the top level commitment to these sorts of programs, which is really important, obviously. And David, I know you've had a lot of experience in this area yourself as well. It'd be great to hear your perspective on what you heard in the case studies. Oh, looks like you're muted there, mate.
Yeah, sorry, I was just trying to unmute. Look, very interesting presentations, Cameron and Rob. Thank you very much for those. Well, some really good aspects in both of those. One, the support that you're providing around dealing with the small businesses, because a lot of those local businesses are mum and dad type operations, which struggle in capacity, in particular with submitting bids. The larger tier ones have got bid teams, etc., and that they do them on a daily basis. And the mum and dad operations struggle in those aspects because they're time consuming and quite technical sometimes. So that was quite good. The social value aspects in working with the tier ones, really critical element for local procurement and those social value benefits that can come back to community. And if the tier ones are I suppose, not taking advantage of the opportunities of working with guys such as yourselves to identify those local businesses and their capabilities, etc., then they're missing out on those opportunities, and community is missing out on those opportunities. So really good to see that they're signing up, especially to the compact in Gippsland, the GROW program. I see there are some additional opportunities for what both of you are doing in those spaces, especially when you're dealing with those tier ones. And it might be something that you would want to consider. You may have considered it already, but around the KPIs and the reporting requirements, there are opportunities in that space with the tier ones looking to address their own social value agendas. So that might be worth exploring. Apart from that, I think that's it from me. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thanks, David. Should ask Rob or Cameron, did you have any reflections on when you heard each other's case studies? Maybe Rob, anything from you when you heard about the Gippsland program?
Yeah, look, I think what's happening in Gippsland, it's very, obviously very interesting in terms of, I suppose, that concept that's being developed. There's a lot of learnings that I'll be able to take out of that and apply here in council. Sort of what we've been aiming to do is sort of have a number of, I suppose, smaller but sort of key focuses, which I feel we've been able to deliver well, but we really need to now, I suppose, the next phase of our evolution in terms of sort of social procurement is really sort of broadening that now as well, and I think that's again what Gippsland has done very well. So look, some very good learnings for myself.
Yeah, great. And Cam, anything you picked up there? Obviously, you've helped be part of this yourself in Gippsland, but obviously the being part of these building from the bottom up. Any sort of suggestions for us in Queensland and some ideas for us?
Well, I think from Rob's presentation, I mean, to me, having the policy lever is really critical to being able to drive the outcome. So in Victoria, we're blessed with that from a Victorian government perspective because we have the whole of government social procurement framework that's in place. So I guess, to address David's point about, how the tier ones are really having that accountability. I mean, they do in the Victorian government contracts because it is actually a requirement around the reporting of those outcomes. There are actually contractual targets in the contracts around delivering social impact and reporting on the impact. So yeah, the policy driver is really important. I mean, there's a social license aspect, I think, for a lot of private project proponents as well, because obviously they want to be able to demonstrate within the region that they are going to provide a significant contribution back, if they want to get the approvals and they want the community to come on board. But if it's government work, I think having the policy drivers is important. I'll just pick up on one other point, is that the reporting is a real challenge anywhere. So in Victoria with the social procurement framework, the biggest challenge is the reporting. We're dealing with people like the Level Crossing Alliances, who are some of the biggest projects in the state, and they're really struggling to get that data through the supply chain. It's really tricky for anyone, particularly the further you dig in the supply chain, it gets harder and harder. And our experience to date, unfortunately, has been there's really no substitute for grunt work and having human resources to do the work, to train the supply chain, and then to physically to chase them. It's not like there's a simple system or solution that makes it easy. We've got ICN in Victoria who plays the role of capturing a lot of that data, but it doesn't really make it any easier for the contractor to be able to report the data. So that's a huge challenge for everyone. I think in Victoria, one observation I have is that I think that the data that the state's looking for is not necessarily the right data, and it's creating a lot of effort for people. And I question what the value of the data is that they're looking for. What does it matter what the rate of an individual is? Trying to get all this information across the workforce. I just don't really see the benefit of it. So I think starting at the beginning, what is the data that we really need and provides the most value is the correct place to start. And I don't think that that's happened very often.
Yeah, I think that a lot of us probably face that challenge, and sounds like you did that particular journey quite well in Townsville, working out what you guys wanted to be tracking there as well, Rob. So sounds like you now need to be actually monitoring it a bit more as a challenge there.
Yeah, correct. We're quite fortunate in Townsville that look, it is a smaller regional town, so we understand who a lot of the local Indigenous businesses are. But again, I'd say once every 2 or 3 months, a business will sort of crop up that again we weren't aware were Indigenous business. So again, it's really sort of monitoring that and reflecting our records to make sure that they're accurate.
Yeah, great. Hey, look, I'm conscious of time, and we did want to try and get a little bit of feedback on how CIPS could be helping to support regional areas engage a bit more. So I don't know, I'll hand over to maybe Kylie to sort of give us a bit of feedback, from your perspective, how you could see CIPS doing a bit more of this sort of activity. We did get the survey feedback before. Does that sort of reflect what you thought made sense?
Yeah, definitely. I think they, like you said, they're easy to organise now, to set up, an hour webinar, and just getting feedback on topics. Like this has been great today. A lot of the stuff we see is more, it isn't regional. So I think the challenges that we have regionally can be different. So I would definitely, encourage more of these.
Yeah, great. And was there any questions in the inbox there, Justin, or any other items which we want to address at all?
Not in the Q&A there. I think that was nothing to address there.
All right. And Richie, was there any sort of inputs from you on about this regional approach from CIPS?
No, it's a good idea. I think it's long overdue. The regions have sort of had to fend for themselves for a long time, and I think sessions like this only help regional areas, and even in Townsville itself, we used to have a Townsville procurement leaders group that met regularly, but we've sort of dropped the ball on that, and it's probably something we should pick up again.
Just on mute there, Dougal.
Yeah. Any last closing comments from you, Rob, before we probably close the webinar?
No, look, I think today was a great session. I think any sort of forums or opportunities that really invites sort of that collaboration and knowledge sharing is much welcome. So be it a webinar or potentially some face-to-face sessions would definitely help. Look, not only us guys here in Townsville, but then obviously a lot of smaller sort of regional rural communities as well.
Yep. Excellent, guys. Well, I think at the end of the session, we'll be able to put a survey through to you when you leave the webinar. So please feel free to leave some comments. We've got the email address there as well, which I'll put up on the screen here. And we'll certainly look forward to catching up with everyone for the next webinar. Please let us know your feedback, and we'll look forward to catching up with you. Oop, hang on. There we go. There. That's good. There. Thank you very much. And we'll look forward to catching up with the next webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.